My fellow citizens of all nations, The Coming Race, or The Vril, Power of Coming Race by Edward Bulwer. Now this work is very interesting because of the way it is written. Now, when I read this book, especially in the beginning, when I was read first few chapters, basically, I had like the questions. I was freaking out. In fact, I was like, "Is this a fiction? Like, who writes a fiction like this?" And I read a lot of fictional stories, and I've never read something like this before. Like the author writes as if he really experienced these things, and there are a lot of interesting facts about this book that I found while I was reading it. So let me share with you right now the certain notes and takeaways from this book. Now the beginning part. Now this is what he says about the location of the place he's going, because he has to basically go basically beneath the earth, where apparently there is a large empty space where some creatures live. And here's how he starts it. The reader will understand. Era, he closed this narrative. My reason for concealing all clue to the district of which I write, and will perhaps thank me for refraining from any description that may tend to its discovery. Now, this is very suspicious. Like, why would he talk about it like that? And he starts the story by explaining who he is and what he does, and from what type of family he is, and from what type of situation. And he's like, it doesn't feel like a fictional story. It feels like he's writing his biography. Like you have this genuine feeling when you read this work. And basically, his friend contacts him, and he goes with his friend, and his friend is basically works in a certain mine where they dig something, basically, and he kind of supervises it. He doesn't really work with his hand there, but the workers will find there's something. Basically, workers are convinced that they hear some voices beneath, where there should be nothing at all. Some sort of voices, which is very weird. So when he goes to his friend, like he's like very honest. He basically explains talks the way as most people would, and most people would think. Basically, he thinks that his friend is kind of nuts, or kind of uses some drugs, maybe even, because like who would believe it? Who would take this type of story seriously, right? But they decide to descend down, basically, and guess what? This friend was not hallucinating at all, but sadly that friend will die the moment they land, and he will be eaten by some gigantic creature, which is extinct on the upper world, basically. Let's now remember this term, because I'm going to use it. Basically, there is this upper world, and there is the world basically below. Now, the first encounter with this race, with this powerful race, basically, these creatures are very powerful beings, and the way he first encountered this creature was that very interesting, because when he first saw this creature, he felt some sort of a pressure on him, non-physical pressure, when he was looking at this being, because he went immediately on his knees and he just could not look at it. Basically, there was so much non-visible power to this creature, and this race, let's call this the race of Vril, basically is so powerful that they can manipulate people. They could just manipulate this man as a puppet, literally. And when I say like a puppet, I mean literally. They basically could make him do anything. They could, paralyze him, make him talk, say whatever they think they wanted to him basically without his permission. Like they could just force him to speak the truth. Also, they had a very strange power, and they had wings, but the wings were not attached to them like directly. It wasn't like part of their body, but it was some sort of a technology. And the interesting thing is that females in this society are much more powerful than males, and they have very specific traditions there, and a lot of things are reversed and like completely opposite to the way we live here and the way we live in this society, in upper world basically. And this race is just like the type of power this race has is just ridiculous. And this is very interesting here because when he writes this book, there is no such thing as a nuclear bomb or these weapons of mass destruction. So he literally guessed things that really don't exist back in his time, the author of this book, because it would be really hard for him to imagine, but for us it's really easy to think about it. But he adds a different perspective to this characteristic, because not only there can be a weapon of mass destruction that just can wipe out the city, but there, according to him, there can be just people, like a very limited number of individuals, so powerful that to them that numbers are irrelevant. You can be as much as you want, many you want, but for them it simply doesn't matter. Just like nuclear weapon doesn't care about like how many people live in the city. Like that way, like so the power balance, like power is not in like numbers, but power is in actual power. Basically, this is what he says. Okay, just because they were like a 20, 30 million doesn't matter. And by the way, there was a very interesting moment where he was kind of trying to brag by the race he was from, and he was explaining, well, and one of the members of the real race explained to him that there are some these people that live in different way from us here below, and we could just pretty much wipe them out if we wanted. And we would do it by sending our children. By children, I mean literal children, like kids of like 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 years old kids. You just wipe out their 30 million people. And they have like the weapons that these people have. These weapons have like tremendous power. I mean, tremendous power would be probably not correct statement. Like they have like power to demolish cities. And plus thinking about their ability. And it's like pretty much their type of people. If we were to see it, we would think that they are angels or something, especially the females. Men would definitely think about that about them. But they have like the really power to manipulate. And actually he was talking about the certain vein they have, which was very visible, physically visible, and they are like literally a different race with like really great power. Like the great power is understatement. Now there is this person Z, and it's her name, and basically he stays with her family basically there, and they make with him a promise to not to tell anyone where he's exactly from because of certain reasons, and he just cannot talk about the place he's from. Now here is where he explains basically on what level they brought the art of destruction. And let me read this quote because it's very interesting. But the effects of the alleged discovery of the means to direct the more terrible force of Vril were chiefly remarkable in their influence upon social polity. As these effects become familiarly known and skillfully administered, war between real discoverers ceased. And look what he's saying, like, for they brought the art of destruction to such a perfection as to annul all superiority in numbers, discipline, or military skill. Now look what he said. As these effects became familiarly known and skillfully administered, war between the real discoverers ceased, for they brought the art of destruction to such perfection that annulled those superiority in numbers, discipline, or military skill. And again, as I've already said, when we talk about people that already have nuclear bombs, like this is one of the things that prevented them in upper world history military destruction because it was zero-sum game. Basically, nobody would win anything, neither Soviet Union, neither United States, because if it would go nuclear, and nobody would be winner of it. So they didn't vote. But the point is how this man can guess such things. I mean, just by this, it can be said that this is not just some stupid person. Like, if this person is stupid, then I don't know your standard spellow dish. Now, now seriously, what I've explained all of these things, but now look, the numbers, discipline on military skills, like simply it makes these things all irrelevant because this has such a destructive power. And actually, he was in this work. He was actually criticizing our society. Basically, directly says that in upper world, people are just bullying. The system is built in a way that females are bullied. And now this is for his time to say it such a blunt way. Well, because this is true. Like, even the religious systems and etc. are like just built in a way that just bullies the woman. Now, and he says it now in real society. It's opposite. Actually, the females are the ones that pursue men, and they actually have a type of tradition, for example, that they give up the right to fly after they marry, and it's like very different society. Like in the ones that have to like go and so-called hunt or something like that are the females, and they are very powerful. By the way, their connection with this power, this mysterious power, is much more powerful than men can achieve. So the females of this society are incredibly powerful. In reality, in this society, females are the powerful. Then the weak race in this race is actually a male race, is weak, and female race is really strong. So this situation is kind of reversed, and it's so much difference there. So this society like functions completely differently. For example, like people there don't thirst over wealth, and in fact, it's very unusual in rural society for a person to want a wealth to be rich, basically. And also, the very interesting thing is that in this society, people live like up to an age of 130. Actually, he was in a funeral of a person that died in that age. And what is very interesting about this society is that they live basically. Well, let's say like if in upper world, if person like becomes like 100 years old, can't walk or work properly, etc. Now in real society, even if you are 100, you don't experience this. You are just still in the same energy as you were young during your younger period. Basically, they live just as same way in older age, just like they were in younger ages. Basically, they don't experience this tiredness and weakness and etc. They just live a perfect life in their whatever timeline they have. So their health just don't deteriorate in that sense. They just die. So, and now you would expect that this society would be democratic, but no, it's not. It's actually an autocracy, or basically some would call it like the ruling class just cannot be changed. But here is the interesting thing: if these societies are built like Greek cities would be, for example, in upper world. Basically, if you don't like it here, let's say you live in this specific community and you don't like this community, and so communities don't overgrow. They like maintain certain number, which I forgot, but they don't overgrow their communities. Basically, their members of community have to move and create different places. They don't stay in the same place. They don't overcrowd their communities. Interesting thing is that if somebody doesn't like something in this community, they just can stand up and leave. They don't fight to change things and etc. Just stand up and leave. It's like a very common thing there. And at the same time, now you have to understand this, for you to make sense why this such advanced society would have such a form of rule. Well, because of the power of the Vril. Remember what I've said, what we read already. Like their like powers. This is something like even a tiny kid can hold. This is not just like a nuclear weapon or specifically everybody has. Imagine society where everybody has like tiny nuclear bomb in their hands. That every member of society has access to this. Like if they like even if this ruling class first of all messes with too much, what they can do, it will lead to disaster, because both of them are in equal situation of power. They are too powerful, simply put. Like fight within them would be like disaster. None of them would survive. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's impossible to bully another man in that society because they are powerful, really powerful. Now they have this proverb, by the way. Now this is not. He says that like a lot of is lost in paraphrasing this saying, but relatively this is how it sounds. No happiness without order, no order without authority, no authority without unity. So even though they have the authority, they at the same time have the unity. And again, if somebody doesn't like it, they can leave. And by the way, nobody stays there. Most of them, like most new members of that community, leave to create new communities, and they just expand the race. And again, they have this certain thing that also the author of the book goes real deep into explanation of basically the language they have. Again, it's very weird at the same time. Like, why? Like, what type of person writes a fiction invents? It goes so deeply in explaining the language and etc. But there is like two words I found very interesting in this language. Ivazi, which means eternal goodness, and Nan-zi, which means Nan-zi, eternal evil. This is the meaning of these words, basically, in their language. And there are other words, for example, Pupra, that means disgust, Punaria, falsehood, the vilest kind of evil. Push or posh, I have already confessed to be untranslatable, literally. So some things are not possible to translate, not big deal. Now, there is an interesting thing about how they deal with the idea of the Supreme Being. I have said that Vril discourages all speculations on the nature of the Supreme Being. Basically, these kind of speculations are discouraged because, and this is, by the way, very deep. This person seems to be very educated in like different religions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Like it's very clear to me, especially since I'm actually right now pursuing master's degree on religious studies, and I was actually studying these certain things about these religions, and I just could tell that this person is very a lot more knowledgeable in these religions, in Hinduism and Buddhism and general Christianity and etc. Like this person is really knowledgeable in these things, and you can tell it because of like the way he writes. And here, for example, like what is the nature of a Supreme Being? Like people don't realize it, but this is a debatable topic, and nobody really knows an ultimate answer to this question. For example, I am saying that the nature of the Supreme Being at best is indifferent. Like the Supreme Being is just indifferent. It doesn't care. Like Supreme Being sits somewhere there, for example. If it has a physical problem, it just looks. That doesn't care. Like some people are suffering, whatever, or something happens. The Supreme Being just sits like this, exactly, which just doesn't care. So it's really this. So really, a society generally discourages this type of speculations, which is good, because again, it brings no good to the community at the end of the day. Now, this is such a deep statement. There is no small and no great in the eyes of the divine life giver. Brilliant, brilliant. Now, there is, of course, they have ancient books basically where there is a basically saying that basically they were some sort of basically they were driven there, but they will eventually return. There's the type of legend they have. But now I'm not going to speculate about these things, and I'm going to now explain to you how what type of relationship they have toward books, because it is very like iconic statement, almost like very iconic statement of what they say about the books. And here is their attitude toward literature generally. Our public libraries contain all the books of the past which time has preserved. Those books, for the reason above stated, are infinitely better than any can write nowadays, and they are open to all to read without cost. We are not, and this is iconic. This is iconic. Look, we are not such fools as to pay for reading inferior books, when we can read superior books for nothing. And when I read this, I was like, damn, we are not such fools as to pay for reading inferior books when we can read superior books for nothing. And he also remarks that with us, novelty has an attraction. And a new book, if bad, is read, an old book, through good, is neglected. And another statement, which is also deep, has a deep trust in this, that he who studies old books will always find in them something new, and he who reads new books will always find them something old, which is, again, a truth. Now, there is actually in this work a deep critique of the correct civilization we live in, over basically where this civilization is heading, because the direction of this civilization is nihilism, and it is in nihilism all. I mean, if we were to look at how this civilization works, this civilization is run by the altar of growth, and the main engine of this civilization is hunger and greed. And this is just the truth. No matter whether you like it or not, this is relevant. Like, the altar of growth is there. It's like clear. And the main engine of this altar of growth is hunger and greed. Or some may say just greed, or some may argue it's just hunger. Now, this is basically a very deep critique of our so-called society we are from. And they, for example, there is a very interesting proverb they have. The poor man's need is the rich man's shame. Now, let me read this to you, the critique of our society. They pretend to be all equals, and the more they have struggled to be so, by removing all distinctions and starting afresh, the more glaring and intolerable that disparity becomes. Because nothing in hereditary affections and associations is left to soften the one naked distinction between the many who have nothing and few who have much. Of course, the many hate the few, but without the few they cannot live. This is our society right now. Now, there is this, what I will said, where I turn my eyes or lend my ears, it seems to me that the guy was the wooing party and the Anne, the coy and reluctant one. Basically, guy refers to the females of this race, and Anne refers to the males of this society. Now, this is the ending thoughts, and I will explain other things after I finish doing this. Now, this is how the work basically ends. Basically, he explains that if the person from the upper world were to go there, they would feel insanely unhappiness there, because we are just so focused on our dramas and emotions, and we are so addicted to destruction and traumas and these things that we would just feel absolutely miserable there. And this is the way he ends it. This ending is very important. Only the more I think of people calmly developing in regions excluded from our sight and deemed uninhabitable by our sages, powers surpassing our most disciplined modes of force, and virtues to which our life, social and political, becomes antagonistic in proportion as our civilization advances. The more devotedly I pray that ages may yet elapse before there emerges into sunlight our inevitable destroyers. The race, basically. That's why it's called the coming race, or Vril, the powerful coming race. And this ending, if you were to observe, the way he ends it, he wants this race to come on the surface and just destroy this civilization. This is the type of feeling he lives here. Basically, he is saved by Z, as I mentioned, basically she falls in love with him. And this is very interesting thing because at last, basically, two females of this race fall apparently in love with him. But there is always an interesting thing. This is what, by the way, makes this story kind of very questionable because like, um, why would such a race, for example, fall? Member of such beautiful race and a superior race would fall in love with this person. It just makes any sense. But at the same time, he's questioning how this, for example, Z loves him. Z loves him like a pet or like a man. And even he confesses that it's more like a pet love. And by the way, he is discouraged. To advance toward these people because he is warned strictly that if he dares to advance toward these women, he will be killed. Basically, he will be turned into dust. This is what will happen to him. He will die. It's not like even if he wanted to, he could get in relationship with this female Z, for example. He would basically be killed, and he's warned about it very clearly. But at the same time, when the ends basically questions how he could leave such a beautiful woman behind and just flee. But at the same time, I think he had a question whether it was his free will or not. Because remember what I've said. This race has a power to control. This race literally has power to manipulate and just make you like compliant to their wish. This race just can control people. This is how powerful this race is in this allegedly fictional story. Let's not forget that, like every fool is utterly convinced and every utterly convinced is a fool. So, in allegedly, this race has this power of manipulation. They just can simply manipulate. And I'm not even sure I understand what type of weapons they exactly have, but these weapons have like a real destructive power. Like power that simply can just turn something to dust. And this weapon actually, the kid actually went in hunting to this reptile or something, gigantic creature, and he actually manipulated our man into stop in certain place and just freeze, and he was unable to move because even this tiny 12 years old kid could manipulate that. And then this creature came out of and he stood behind, hiding somewhere, and used this our main character of this story as some sort of a fish. You know how you feel when you're fishing, you use this on hook, right, to catch a fish. This is how he was used basically by this little kid, and he refers to this kid as kind of like devilish kid or something. It's hilarious. It's a hilarious moment. Just you could feel his fear. It was funny. And then when this gigantic creature came out of the water, basically he was turned into dust, and he's really scared in this story. And now, again, the question is basically, how was he viewed by these females? Or female, for example, let's say focus on Z because she was very special, and he's very special. Like, was he looked as a man or as a pet? And it appears that most likely he was looked at as a pet. And he has some doubts, basically, whether it was his free will or not when he basically rejected this female. And later she helped him to return on the surface, basically, in this story. Of course, in this story. But again, it's really hard to. Obviously, it's supposed to be at last a fiction. But again, as I've already said about it. But at the same time, it's a very interesting story. Genuinely, very, very interesting story. But because, the philosophical, for example, there's a lot of wisdom in this book. It shows us what's wrong with our society, our civilization, and how we actually built this civilization. And later, when we are surprised by the consequences of this. And again, he foresaw things that simply don't exist in this time, like weapons of mass destruction. He didn't say weapons of mass destruction, but he imaged the power destructive enough to basically destroy a lot of things. And such type of things basically is talking about simply don't exist official during his time. And the thing is that he basically, it's really hard to say. Basically, maybe he just writes as a fiction, or he believed that what he was saying was the truth, or he just wanted to like create this mystery for people to doubt whether he was serious or not serious in the story, and whether the story is real or not. But he seems to be deeply impressed by this society, and he wrote it. And now I don't know a lot of things about it. The author of this book directly. But of course, you can, by the way, share and comment down below what you think. And, what do you think about this story? Is it fiction, or is it in fact a real story, or is it somewhere between, basically between these two? It's neither completely fiction, neither completely truth, because that can be also the possibility. So it's very hard to speculate, because there are no like evidence. Like, how should I know? Although he tries to hide a lot of things for our sake, obviously. But that's also a very interesting question of how much was it free will, and whether he was looked as a pet or as a man, because he most likely was looked as a pet. Really, he was an inferior creature in the females only in that race are more powerful than the men of that race, and the men of that race are already terrifying powerful. Again, the kids have a monstrous power, and the females are even more powerful. And it's hard to say it, but he does not have a negative. I don't think that he has a negative feelings toward this race of people, but generally it doesn't appear to be so. In fact, he almost like looks forward to their appearance or something. At least that's how it seems, because like you don't see the feeling of, oh my god, the feeling of dread or negativity of this race will come. And also he says that they won't necessarily, when they come out, they won't necessarily destroy. But neither they will accept a no for an answer. He doesn't really say that they will destroy him, but most likely he expects that they will receive answer as a no, and they won't accept that answer. So, but if, for example, they come and they say, just move out, and you say, okay, I will, then they won't destroy you. But if you say no, they will. This is the type of thing he tries to say. This is what it is. And you know what you have to do, fellow dish, or my fellow citizen. If you like this video, you know what you have to do.